Commander Marcus Chun stood at the viewing deck of the UES Retribution, watching the swirling nebula of Kepler 442 paint the void in shades of crimson and gold. His reflection in the reinforced glass showed a man weathered by 3 decades of interstellar warfare, his face bearing the countless scars of humanity's struggle for survival among the stars. The bridge comm crackled to life behind him. "Commander, we're receiving transmission from the Galactic Council. Priority Alpha." Marcus turned from the spectacular view, his military bearing as rigid as the titanium composite armor that had become his second skin. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like gravity from a heavy world. For 15 years, he had led humanity's most elite strike force against the Zephyrian Empire, earning victories that should have been impossible for a species the galaxy considered primitive. The holographic display materialized before him, revealing the angular features of Counselor Vexthera of the Altarian Collective. Her crystalline skin caught the ambient light of the bridge, creating prismatic patterns that danced across her elongated skull. Behind her stood representatives from a dozen other species, all members of the Galactic Council that had reluctantly accepted humanity into their ranks. "Commander Chun." Vexthera's voice carried the melodic quality typical of her species, but Marcus detected the underlying tension. "We have urgent matters to discuss regarding Operation Starfall." Marcus nodded curtly. Operation Starfall had been humanity's most ambitious military campaign yet, a coordinated assault on 3 Zephyrian strongholds simultaneously. The plan had been risky, requiring precise timing and unprecedented cooperation between human forces and alien allies. It had also been Marcus's brainchild. "The operation was a complete success, Counselor," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that seemed to seep into his bones. All 3 targets were neutralized with minimal coalition casualties. "The Zephyrian advance has been halted." Vexthera's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the subtle shift in her posture that indicated discomfort among her species. "Indeed, Commander, your tactical brilliance continues to astound us all. However, there are concerns that require immediate attention." The hologram flickered, and additional figures materialized around the counselor. Marcus recognized Admiral Kethmol of the Regelian Defense Force and General Zarthok of the Andromedan Legion. These were not mere bureaucrats, but seasoned military leaders who commanded respect across the galaxy. "Speak plainly, Counselor," Marcus said, crossing his arms. "What concerns?" Admiral Kethmol stepped forward, his 4 arms gesturing in what Marcus had learned was a sign of respectful disagreement among his people. "Commander Chun, your methods during Operation Starfall were unorthodox. The civilian casualties on Zephyr Prime were higher than anticipated." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Those casualties were within acceptable parameters given the strategic importance of the target. The Zephyrian weapons facilities were embedded within their civilian infrastructure deliberately. It was a calculated risk. Calculated by human standards, General Zarthok interjected, his serpentine form coiling with agitation. "Your species approaches warfare with a brutality that makes many of our member worlds uncomfortable." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. For 3 decades, he had dedicated his life to protecting not just humanity, but all the species of the Galactic Council. He had watched friends die in the void between stars, had made decisions that would haunt him for eternity, all in service of a greater cause. "My brutality?" Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I've saved more lives than I've taken. Every decision I make is weighed against the alternative of Zephyrian domination." Counselor Vexthera raised a hand for silence. "Commander, we do not question your dedication or your results. However, the Council has voted. Effective immediately, Operation Starfall will be investigated by an independent tribunal. Your command decisions will be scrutinized, and depending on their findings, charges may be filed under the Galactic Convention on Warfare." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Marcus stared at the holographic figures before him, these aliens he had called allies, and felt something cold settle in his chest. They were going to put him on trial for winning a war they couldn't fight themselves. I see, Marcus said quietly. And what the Zephyrian fleet massing at the edge of the Vega system? Who will stop them while you conduct your investigation? That will be handled by Joint Council Forces, Admiral Kethmol replied. Human participation will be limited pending the tribunal's findings. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the implications. Humanity was being sidelined, the most effective commander benched at the moment when they were needed most. It was political maneuvering disguised as moral righteousness. Very well, Counselor. I'll submit to your tribunal. But know this, when the Zephyrians break through council lines because you're too afraid to fight them properly, the blood will be on your hands, not mine. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of impending disgrace. He had given everything for these people, and now they were treating him like a war criminal. The irony was not lost on him that the galaxy's self-proclaimed civilized species were condemning the very violence that kept them safe. Behind him, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison cleared her throat. Sir? Orders. Marcus turned to face his second-in-command, seeing in her eyes the same confusion and anger that he felt. Prepare for immediate departure to Arcturus Station. We have a tribunal to attend. As the UES Retribution changed course, Marcus remained at the viewing deck, watching the nebula fade into the distance. For the first time in his career, he began to question whether the galaxy was worth saving. Arcturus Station orbited the massive blue giant star like a metallic moon, its sprawling structure housing the Galactic Council's administrative heart. Marcus had visited the station countless times for briefings and strategic planning sessions, but never as the accused in a military tribunal. The irony tasted bitter in his mouth as the UES Retribution docked at the military wing. The tribunal chamber was a monument to galactic bureaucracy, its circular design allowing representatives from dozens of species to observe the proceedings. Marcus sat in the defendant's chair, feeling exposed without his usual tactical armor. Instead, he wore the dress uniform of the United Earth Space Force, its blue fabric adorned with medals and ribbons that chronicled his 3 decades of service. Across from him sat the tribunal panel. Counselor Vextera, as the presiding judge, Admiral Kethmol, representing military interests, and Magistrate Yuldena of the Centauri Commonwealth serving as the legal expert. Behind them, the viewing gallery buzzed with representatives from nearly every council member world. This tribunal is convened to examine the conduct of Commander Marcus Chun during Operation Starfall, Counselor Vextera announced, her crystalline voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The charges include excessive use of force, disregard for civilian casualties, and violation of the Galactic Convention on Warfare. Marcus listened as the prosecutor, a tall Altarian named Kesthor, outlined the case against him. Holographic displays showed the devastation on Zephyr Prime, the civilian districts that had been caught in the crossfire when human forces bombarded the weapons facilities. The images were brutal, but Marcus had seen worse in person. The defendant's forces used thermonuclear weapons in proximity to civilian populations, Kesthor stated, his voice dripping with moral superiority. This represents a fundamental disregard for the sanctity of non-combatant life that violates everything the Galactic Council stands for. When called to defend himself, Marcus stood slowly. He looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens, these species that had welcomed humanity into their alliance when they needed soldiers to fight their war. Now, they sat in judgment of the methods that had kept them alive. Honored tribunal, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. 3 years ago, the Zephyrian Empire controlled 60% of this galaxy. Their expansion had swallowed 17 member worlds of this council. Your combined fleets had suffered defeat after defeat, losing ground, and lives with every engagement. The chamber stirred uncomfortably. Marcus pressed on, his words cutting through the diplomatic politeness like a plasma torch through armor plating. I was asked to take command of joint operations because human tactical doctrines had proven effective where council strategies had failed. We didn't fail because we were more brutal. We succeeded because we were willing to make the hard choices that you couldn't. Admiral Kethmole's 4 arms gestured in agitation. Commander, no one questions your effectiveness. But at what cost? How many innocent lives were deemed acceptable losses in your calculations? Every life lost weighs on me, Marcus replied, his voice growing harder. But I measure those losses against the alternative. If we had failed to destroy those weapons facilities, they would have produced enough antimatter warheads to sterilize a dozen Council worlds. The mathematics are simple, even if the morality is complex. Magistrate Yuldena leaned forward, her insectoid features clicking as she spoke. You speak of mathematics, Commander, but warfare is not merely an equation. There are principles, standards of conduct that separate civilization from savagery. The word savagery hung in the air like a poison cloud. Marcus felt something snap inside him, a carefully maintained barrier that had held back years of frustration and resentment. Savagery. Marcus's laugh was bitter and cold. You want to discuss savagery? Let me tell you about the first Zephyrian raid on New Geneva. They used bioweapons that turned children into living weapons against their parents. They broadcast the screams across subspace as psychological warfare. That's savagery. The chamber fell silent, but Marcus wasn't finished. 3 decades of diplomatic restraint crumbled like a dam giving way to floodwaters. For 15 years, I fought your war with one hand tied behind my back, always mindful of your precious conventions and protocols. I've watched good soldiers die because we had to fight cleanly while our enemies used every dirty trick in the book. And now, when we finally start winning, you have the audacity to put me on trial for methods you were happy to ignore when they were saving your lives. Counselor Vextera's crystalline features hardened. Commander Chun, you will maintain proper decorum in this chamber. Decorum? Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising. You want decorum while the Zephyrian fleet masses for another assault? While your own intelligence reports show they're developing new bioweapons that could wipe out entire star systems. This tribunal is a joke, and you know it. The viewing gallery erupted in shocked murmurs and angry chittering from various species. Marcus ignored them all, focused on the 3 judges who held his fate in their alien hands. The truth is, you never wanted an ally in humanity. You wanted attack dogs that you could unleash when convenient and leash when the fighting got too ugly for your sensibilities. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded in proving that even your most effective defenders are expendable when politics demands it. Admiral Kethmole stood, all 4 arms spread in a gesture of authority. Commander, you are in contempt of this tribunal. Your words border on sedition against the Council. Marcus laughed again, the sound echoing through the chamber like breaking glass. Sedition? Against a Council that throws its defenders to the wolves the moment they become inconvenient? I've given 30 years of my life, watched friends die in the void, made decisions that will haunt me until my last breath, all for the greater good. And this is my reward. He looked around the chamber one more time, seeing the alien faces that regarded him with mixtures of fear, disgust, and disappointment. These are not his people. They never had been, despite all his sacrifices. I see now that I was naive to believe in your noble cause, Marcus said, his voice growing quiet but no less dangerous. You speak of civilization and standards, but you're nothing more than hypocrites who want to keep your hands clean while others do your dirty work. Counselor Vextera's voice carried a note of finality. Commander Chun, this tribunal finds your conduct both during Operation Starfall and here today to be incompatible with continued service in Council forces. You are hereby stripped of command and expelled from the joint military coalition. Marcus nodded slowly, unsurprised by the verdict. He had expected as much the moment they announced this tribunal. What surprised him was how little he cared anymore. Thank you, Counselor, he said, his voice now calm and controlled. You've just freed me from the burden of protecting people who don't deserve protection. As security guards moved to escort him from the chamber, Marcus straightened his uniform one last time. The medals and ribbons caught the light, a testament to battles fought and wars won in service of an ungrateful galaxy. Walking out of the tribunal chamber felt like walking out of prison. For the first time in 30 years, Marcus Chun was truly free. The small human settlement on Kepler 438b had grown substantially since Marcus last visited 2 years ago. What had once been a collection of prefabricated shelters and basic infrastructure had evolved into a thriving community of nearly 10,000 people. Gardens bloomed in the amber light of the red dwarf star, and children played in the carefully maintained parks that reminded residents of Earth's green spaces. Marcus stood at the observation deck of the transport vessel as it descended through the planet's atmosphere. He had discarded his military uniform in favor of simple civilian clothes, but the weight of his discharged status still pressed on his shoulders like invisible armor. 3 weeks had passed since the tribunal. 3 weeks of travel through space lanes he had once protected as humanity's shield against the dark. The settlement's administrator, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, met him at the small spaceport. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of steady composure that came from managing a frontier colony. Marcus had served with her husband during the Third Rigel campaign before Thomas Rodriguez was killed defending a medical evacuation ship. "Marcus," Elena said, embracing him warmly. "It's good to see you again, though I wish the circumstances were different." Word of his disgrace had traveled fast through human space. The official council statement painted him as a rogue commander who had exceeded his authority and violated galactic law. The human media had been more sympathetic, but even they struggled to defend actions that had resulted in significant civilian casualties. "Elena," Marcus replied, returning the embrace. "Thank you for the sanctuary. I needed somewhere to think." She led him through the settlement's main thoroughfare, past bustling markets and workshops where colonists pursued the 1,000 tasks necessary to build civilization on a distant world. Children ran past them, laughing and playing games that mixed Earth traditions with innovations born of their unique environment. "You know you're welcome here as long as you need," Elena said as they walked. "But, Marcus, what you're going through, the guilt and anger, Tom went through something similar after the Centauri incident." Marcus remembered the Centauri incident. An entire Zephyrian battle group had been eliminated when Thomas Rodriguez's medical ship, supposedly unarmed, had revealed hidden weapons and destroyed them in a surprise attack. The act had saved thousands of refugees, but it had violated the medical neutrality conventions that both sides nominally respected. Tom never regretted saving those people, Elena continued, but he struggled with the means. He said the hardest part wasn't making the decision. It was living with the judgment of people who would never have to make such choices themselves. They reached Elena's home, a modest structure that managed to feel warm and welcoming despite being constructed from the same standard components as every other building. Over dinner, she shared news from across human space. The withdrawal of human forces from joint council operations had created a strategic gap that the aliens were struggling to fill. Zephyrian raids were increasing, and several outlying systems had gone dark. The Council is trying to recruit mercenary forces to fill the gap, Elena explained, pouring coffee that had been carefully cultivated in the settlement's hydroponics base. But nothing they can hire comes close to replacing the UES fleet effectiveness. Marcus stared into his cup, watching steam rise from the dark liquid. They made their choice. They wanted clean hands more than they wanted victory. Now, they get to live with the consequences. And what about you? What do you want? It was a question Marcus had been asking himself for 3 weeks. For 30 years, his life had been defined by duty, by the weight of responsibility for humanity's survival and the galaxy's freedom. Now, stripped of command and expelled from the coalition, he felt adrift in a way he hadn't experienced since his early days as a junior officer. That evening, Marcus walked alone through the settlement's perimeter, where automated defense systems provided protection against the planet's indigenous predators. The red dwarf sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson that reminded him of the nebula where this nightmare had begun. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of an encrypted communications device, one of the few personal items he had retained from his military service. The small screen displayed an incoming message with the highest security clearance. The face that appeared belonged to Admiral Sarah Morrison, his former second-in-command who had somehow managed to avoid the political fallout that had destroyed his career. Her expression was grim, and Marcus could see the strain of command weighing on her shoulders. "Marcus," she said without preamble, "I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone in uniform right now, but I needed to update you on the situation." Marcus activated the privacy field and sat down on a nearby bench. "Go ahead, Sarah. How bad is it?" "Bad. The Zephyrians have launched a major offensive across 3 sectors. They're using new bioweapons, something we've never seen before. The Council forces are taking heavy casualties and losing ground fast." The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. These were the systems he had spent years defending, populated by billions of sentient beings from dozens of species. Despite his anger at their leaders, he couldn't help but feel responsible for their fate. "What about human space? Are we still staying neutral?" Sarah's expression darkened. "That's complicated." President Chun received a formal request from the Council for renewed human participation in joint operations. The political pressure is intense. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. They had expelled him for being too brutal, and now they wanted humanity back because their gentle methods were failing catastrophically. And the president is considering it, but there are conditions. They want assurances that human forces will operate under Council oversight, with strict rules of engagement and political officers embedded in our command structure. The idea was absurd. They wanted humanity's military effectiveness while neutering the very qualities that made them effective. It was like asking a surgeon to operate while wearing blindfolds and mittens. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "I need you to understand something. When I walked out of that tribunal, I meant what I said. I'm done fighting their war for them." "I understand. But Marcus, people are dying. Good people on both sides. The Zephyrians aren't just conquering territory anymore. They're implementing some kind of systematic extermination protocol. Entire worlds are being sterilized." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his former responsibilities pressing down on him like a gravitational field. For 3 decades, preventing such atrocities had been his primary mission. The thought of standing aside while genocide unfolded was almost unbearable. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" "Advice. Guidance. You're the most brilliant tactical mind humanity has ever produced. There has to be a way to stop this that doesn't require us to become lapdogs for the Council." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the alien constellations wheel overhead. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than bitter. "There might be, but it would mean abandoning the coalition entirely. Humanity would have to stand alone. Against the entire Zephyrian Empire? That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to win. The Council's weakness isn't just their reluctance to fight dirty. It's their inability to make hard strategic decisions, because every action has to be approved by committee. We've been carrying them for years, not just militarily, but strategically. Sarah leaned forward on the screen. "What are you thinking?" Marcus stood and began pacing, his strategic mind automatically analyzing possibilities. The Zephyrians have overextended themselves with this offensive. Their supply lines are stretched, and they're operating on multiple fronts simultaneously. If someone hit them hard and fast at the right pressure points, their entire advance could collapse. But that would require coordinated strikes across dozens of systems, perfect timing, and resources we don't have as an independent force. Resources we don't have, Marcus agreed, but advantages they've never had to face. Council forces fight like Council forces, predictable and restrained. Humanity has never fought a war for survival without those restraints. The conversation continued for another hour, with Marcus outlining strategic possibilities while carefully avoiding any commitment to return to active service. When the transmission finally ended, he sat alone in the gathering darkness, feeling the pull of duty warring with the bitter taste of betrayal. The galaxy was burning, and the people who had thrown him away were begging for his help. The question was whether he still cared enough about their survival to answer that call. The emergency session of Earth's Security Council convened in the underground complex beneath Geneva, where humanity's leaders had gathered to decide their species' fate. Marcus sat at the far end of the curved table, no longer wearing the uniform of any military service, but present as a civilian consultant. Around him, the most powerful humans in the galaxy debated whether to rejoin a war they had been expelled from. President Catherine Chun, no relation despite the shared surname, presided over the session with the grim efficiency that had characterized her administration. Her dark eyes moved between the assembled military leaders, diplomats, and intelligence officials as reports streamed in from across the galaxy. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, Admiral Morrison reported, her holographic presence transmitted from the UES Prometheus at the edge of human space. 17 Council worlds have gone dark in the past week. Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are implementing their final protocol. The final protocol was a nightmare scenario that human intelligence had uncovered during deep reconnaissance missions. It involved the systematic sterilization of conquered worlds using bioweapons specifically designed to target the genetic markers of different species. Entire civilizations could be wiped out while leaving infrastructure intact for Zephyrian colonization. "What's the Council's response?" asked Defense Secretary Harrison, a graying veteran who had served under 3 previous administrations. "Panic," Admiral Morrison replied bluntly. "They've sent formal requests for immediate human reintegration into the coalition. They're willing to restore Commander Chen's rank and command authority." All eyes turned to Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the briefing. He understood the political calculation. They needed him back, but they also needed to save face after the very public tribunal that had condemned his methods. "And the conditions?" President Chen asked. "Full operational autonomy for human forces," Admiral Morrison continued. "No political oversight, no embedded observers, no restrictions on tactical decisions. Essentially, they're offering us carte blanche to fight the war however we see fit." The irony was palpable. 6 months ago, these same aliens had put him on trial for the methods they were now begging him to employ. The desperation in their offer revealed the true scope of the crisis. "Mr. Chun," President Chun addressed Marcus formally, despite their previous familiarity. "Your assessment?" Marcus stood slowly, his civilian clothes feeling strange after 30 years of military bearing. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades making life and death decisions on a galactic scale. "The Council's offer is meaningless," he said flatly. "They're not offering partnership. They're offering to hire us as exterminators. The moment we solve their Zephyrian problem, we'll be back to being the barbaric humans who can't be trusted with civilized warfare." "So you recommend refusing?" asked Secretary Harrison. "I recommend something else entirely." Marcus activated the holographic display at the center of the table, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with current battle lines marked in crimson. "The Council is dying because they've never understood the fundamental nature of this war. They think it's about territory and resources. It's not. It's about species survival." The map zoomed in to show the Zephyrian Empire's core systems, heavily fortified worlds that had never faced serious attack. Marcus highlighted 3 specific targets with red markers. The Zephyrians can maintain their current offensive because their industrial base remains intact. They're producing new ships, weapons, and bioweapons faster than the Council can destroy them. Traditional strategy says you need overwhelming force to assault these core worlds, which we don't have, Admiral Morrison noted. "Even with human forces, a direct assault would be suicide." "Correct, which is why we're not going to assault them directly." Marcus manipulated the display, showing trajectory lines that bypass the main defensive positions. "We're going to do something the Council would never approve of, something they consider a war crime." The room fell silent as Marcus outlined his plan. It was audacious, ruthless, and would require tactics that violated every convention of civilized warfare. it would also be devastatingly effective. You're talking about targeting civilian infrastructure, President Chun said quietly. Industrial centers, population hubs, the very things the Galactic Convention exists to protect. I'm talking about total war, Marcus replied. The kind of war that species fight when their existence is at stake. The Zephyrians understand this. That's why they're winning. Secretary Harrison leaned forward, his expression troubled. The political ramifications would be enormous. Even if we succeed, the galaxy would never forgive us for such tactics. The galaxy doesn't have to forgive us, Marcus said. They just have to survive. And they won't, not with half measures and moral posturing. For 2 hours, the debate raged around the table. Military officers argued for the tactical brilliance of Marcus's plan, while diplomats warned of the political consequences. Intelligence officials provided detailed assessments of Zephyrian capabilities, while economists calculated the cost of such a massive undertaking. Throughout it all, Marcus remained calm and analytical, answering questions and refining details with the professional detachment that had characterized his entire career. He wasn't advocating for war. He was simply presenting the mathematical realities of species survival. Finally, President Chun called for silence. She looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leadership, seeing the weight of an impossible decision reflected in their expressions. Mr. Chun, she said formally, if we approve this operation, will you lead it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the tactical challenges, but the personal cost. Taking command would mean returning to the life he had walked away from, accepting responsibility for decisions that would determine the fate of billions. But it would also mean doing so on humanity's terms, not as supplicants begging for acceptance from the Council, but as an independent force acting in their own interests. On 2 conditions, Marcus replied. First, this is a human operation. No Council oversight, no alien advisors, no diplomatic interference. We do this our way or not at all. And the second condition? When this is over, when the Zephyrian threat is eliminated, humanity withdraws from galactic politics entirely. No more coalitions, no more joint operations, no more pretending we belong in their civilized society. We defend human space and let the aliens figure out their own problems. The proposal was radical. It would mean abandoning the alliance that had defined human foreign policy for 50 years, turning their backs on a galaxy that had welcomed them as junior partners. It would also mean freedom from the political constraints that had hampered human effectiveness for decades. President Chin looked around the table one more time, seeing nods from military leaders and worried expressions from diplomats. The vote, when it came, was close but decisive. Very well, Mr. Chun. You have authorization to proceed with Operation Nemesis. May God help us all. As the meeting broke up, Marcus remained behind to coordinate with Admiral Morrison and the other military leaders. For the first time in months, he felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders. It was a burden he had thought himself free of, but one he accepted with the grim determination that had defined his entire career. The galaxy had judged him unfit for civilized warfare. Now they would discover what uncivilized warfare looked like when humanity fought for its survival. 6 months after Operation Nemesis began, the Zephyrian Empire lay in ruins. Their core worlds burned with fires that would smolder for decades, their industrial capacity reduced to scattered debris floating in the void between stars. The bioweapon production facilities that had terrorized the galaxy were nothing more than radioactive craters, and the grand fleets that had conquered 60% of known space had been systematically hunted to extinction. Marcus Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the final Zephyrian stronghold surrender through subspace transmission. The alien commander's forearms trembled as he formally capitulated, ending a war that had consumed the galaxy for nearly 2 decades. Around him, the crew maintained professional composure, but Marcus could feel their satisfaction like a tangible presence. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported from the communication station. We're receiving surrender confirmations from the last 3 holdout systems. Zephyrian resistance has ceased across all fronts. Marcus nodded, feeling empty rather than triumphant. Victory had come at a cost that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Entire Zephyrian colonies had been evacuated to barren moons, their homeworlds rendered uninhabitable by human weapons. Civilian casualties numbered in the hundreds of millions, maybe billions. The exact count would never be known because Marcus had ordered the destruction of record-keeping facilities to prevent the enemy from coordinating their defense. "Excellent work, everyone," Marcus announced to the bridge crew. "Begin Phase 4 operations. Full withdrawal to human space." Phase 4 was the final element of Operation Nemesis, the systematic withdrawal of all human forces from non-human space. Unlike their previous cooperative arrangements with the Galactic Council, this withdrawal was absolute. Human ships, human personnel, human bases, all of it was being pulled back behind a defensive perimeter that encompassed only those systems claimed by Earth and her colonies. The reaction from the Galactic Council had been predictably hysterical. Counselor Vextera had sent increasingly frantic communications demanding explanations, justifications, and assurances that humanity wasn't planning to become the galaxy's new conquerors. Her crystalline features had lost their serene composure as reports came in of human task forces systematically demolishing Zephyrian infrastructure without regard for civilian populations. Marcus had ignored every communication. The time for explanations and justifications had ended the moment they put him on trial for winning their war. "Sir," Admiral Morrison's voice came through the secure channel. "Council forces are requesting permission to enter the former Zephyrian core systems. They want to begin humanitarian relief operations." "Denied," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Those systems are under human military quarantine until our withdrawal is complete. Any Council ships that enter will be treated as hostile." It was a harsh measure, but necessary. Marcus had no intention of allowing the Council to swoop in and claim credit for humanity's victory while simultaneously condemning their methods. If the aliens wanted to play savior to the Zephyrian refugees, they could do it without human assistance. The strategic situation was now exactly what Marcus had envisioned when he accepted command of Operation Nemesis. The Zephyrian Empire was eliminated as a threat, its military completely destroyed, and its population scattered. The Galactic Council remained intact, but significantly weakened, having lost their most effective military allies. And humanity stood alone, powerful enough to defend itself, but isolated from the political complexities of galactic civilization. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself back on Kepler, 438b, the same human colony where he had spent his months of exile. The settlement had grown again, now hosting nearly 20,000 people as refugees from the war zones relocated to safer systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez greeted him with the same warmth as before, but her eyes held new understanding of what he had accomplished. "The official reports are classified," she said as they walked through the expanded market district. "But word travels. They're calling you everything from humanity's greatest hero to its most dangerous war criminal." Marcus shrugged, unbothered by the opinions of others. "History will judge whether I was right or wrong. I only care that humanity survived." That evening, he received a final communication from the Galactic Council. Counselor Vextera appeared on the holographic display, her crystalline features showing exhaustion and defeat. Behind her, Marcus could see the emergency session chamber where dozens of alien species debated humanity's future status. "Commander Chun," she began, using his military title for the first time since the tribunal. "The Council formally acknowledges the success of human military operations against the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has proven itself capable of independent action on a galactic scale." Marcus waited, knowing there was more to come. The Council never made simple acknowledgments without hidden agendas. However, Vextera continued, "The methods employed during these operations have caused significant concern among member worlds. The systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure, the targeting of non-military populations, the complete disregard for the conventions of civilized warfare, all of this has created a situation that cannot be ignored." "Get to the point, Counselor," Marcus said. "What does the Council want?" Isolation, Vexthera replied with surprising directness. By unanimous vote, the Galactic Council has declared human space to be under indefinite quarantine. No Council ships will enter your territory, no diplomatic relations will be maintained, and no technological exchange will be permitted. Humanity is hereby banished from galactic civilization until such time as your species demonstrates the capacity for civilized conduct. Marcus almost smiled. They were giving him exactly what he wanted while believing they were punishing him. I see. And if we refuse to accept this quarantine, then humanity will be classified as a hostile species and dealt with accordingly. Vexthera's threat carried little conviction. She knew as well as Marcus did that the Council lacked the military capability to enforce their will against a united human fleet. Very well, Counselor. Humanity accepts your terms. We'll remain in our own space and leave the galaxy to sort out its own problems. The transmission ended with Vexthera looking confused by his easy acceptance. Marcus deleted the communication log and walked out to the settlement's observation deck, where he could see the stars that marked the borders of human space. For the first time in 35 years, those borders were truly secure. No alien empire threatened human colonies. No galactic politics demanded human involvement. No coalition required human sacrifices for alien causes. Humanity was alone in the universe, but it was free. Marcus thought about the words that had started this journey, the accusations of brutality and savagery that had driven him from the Council service. The aliens had been right about one thing: humanity was savage by their standards. They fought wars to win rather than to feel morally superior. They made hard choices without committees and moral debates. They prioritized survival over civilized appearances. Those qualities had made them outcasts from galactic society. They had also made them the only species capable of stopping the Zephyrian Empire when total victory was required. Standing under the alien constellations of a distant world, Marcus Chun felt at peace for the first time in decades. The armor was finally laid aside, not in defeat, but in victory. Humanity would face whatever came next on their own terms, answerable to no one but themselves. Behind him, children played in the settlement's gardens, their laughter carrying on the evening wind. They would grow up a universe where humanity stood alone among the stars, but they would grow up free. That was worth any price the galaxy chose to exact.